Welcome to the WWH show. I'm excited that we're going to talk about why your soft skills are the key to your success. Soft skills for hard results. I'm so much excited to present to you Arnold Sanow. He is a communication expert, the author of 6 books. He has delivered over 2,500 keynotes and workshops to companies worldwide and was recently named by Successful Meetings magazine as one of the top 5 best bang for the buck speakers in the United States. Arnold also appeared on national news media outlets such as ABC. Arnold, I know how much busy you are, how much excited I am also to have you here. You have been a sought-after speaker in the United States and well-known worldwide. So I can see that you have so many insights and stories you're going to share to me and also our audience. Welcome.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Let's begin our discussion by asking this question. Why is our soft skill makes the huge difference for our success?
Well, let me tell you why soft skills make a huge difference. And there was a study done recently by the Harvard and Stanford University that said that only 15% of your success at your job in getting cooperation and getting people to like you and building a profitable business is going to be due to your technical skills, and 85% is going to be your communication, your emotional intelligence, and your people skills. Now, don't read me wrong. I mean, first of all, if you're not technically competent, you won't have a job.
Exactly.
And you can be the nicest, and if you're and you can be the nicest person in the world. However,
exactly.
It really does make a difference. And in fact, the other reason I bring this up too is that 90% of the companies that I work with, probably 90% of the problems I see in the companies I work with are based on some kind of communication breakdown, whether it's misinformation, miscommunication, misunderstandings. All these things are part of that aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely, because as a trainer, my niche is I'm a trainer who provides trainings, soft skill trainings to technical people like IT people and researchers. So I always emphasize that the difference that you can make in your organization and also to excel and become the to-go-to person in your organization to serve your company and remain relevant, you have to have soft skills on top of hard skills or technical skills.
Yeah, all that plays an important part in the whole thing.
Yeah, but the challenge is that many technical people, they think that as far as I'm good in what I do, it doesn't matter whether I am good in communication or whether I listen or not, whether I create connection with my clients, my team members, and so on. I have been there, by the way. I have seen that really in the corporate world. Some IT people trying to just treat people like they treat computers or devices and so on. Do you think that this message needs to be emphasized in the corporate world where technical people should also develop soft skills?
Yeah, technical people especially need it, and it's interesting because I work also with a lot of technical people from computer companies to scientists to NIH to a number of different organizations, and the point is a lot of these people, like you said, are technically competent and they do a great job. But then there's problems that come up of working with other people that, as I said, there's misunderstandings that come because of that. There's lack of appreciation because they don't know the power of appreciating people, of recognizing people, of motivating people. And so the problem is a lot of these technical people, they're really good at what they do. And then unfortunately, since they're so good at it, they get promoted, and they get promoted to be a manager and a leader, and that's a whole, as you know, is a whole different ball game.
Exactly.
You lead people, you manage things, you lead people, and so there's a whole different aspect of that. So all that technical stuff comes into play, but you can turn off people in a lot of different ways. And a good example of this, one of the clients I work with had somebody who was a risk manager, and I won't mention the name of the company, but I get hired sometimes to do 4-month coaching programs with people who are like quote-unquote bullies or have the skills that turn off people. And this guy was one of the best in the country in what he did. However, he had a high turnover rate. Nobody wanted to work with him. He had a lot of bad communication skills. And so, what we did is we worked with him for 4 months and basically had to let him know that, for example, yelling at people in public, yelling at your staff in public is not a good thing.
Exactly.
For example, simple things like this. And a lot of times people don't know how to say things or put things together, and they don't realize, too, that a lot of times that their body language and their tone is sending a message. And so we work on that type of aspect, too.
So I believe that in your coaching you suggest some tools. Myself, when I work with my clients, I emphasize the importance of self-awareness.
Right.
Because they may not even know that they are doing some damage or disservice to their people. I don't think that they do it because they know it. Sometimes they may not even be aware. So it's very important for them to be aware some of their communication and also some of their interactions, the way they work with other people. The more they are aware, the more they could be able to address that issue.
Yeah, and I'd say 90% of changing anything is to be aware. I mean, that's when you and I do programs and training sessions. It's if people aren't aware that they're doing these things, they never can change. And that's why they go to these training sessions and hopefully are open enough to see themselves. And the problem is a lot of people don't see themselves either. I was working with a team the other day, and a team building session, and I went around to each of the people there, and I said, what do you want to get out of it, and what do you want to get? And everybody told me. And then the manager of the team says, well, I don't really need this. This is for the staff.
Wow.
And I saw a woman in back of him doing kill them and stuff. And there's a good book by Sandy Crow, who's another speaker, she wrote a book called When Strangling Isn't an Option. You know how you really want to kill somebody, but you can't. But he didn't see himself, so he's never going to change. Or
Exactly.
you might experience this too. Sometimes people are very high up in an organization, and they'll say, well, I've heard this stuff before, I don't need it. And they're the ones who probably need it more than anybody else in that group. So keep aware of that part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned in your books is relationship building. This is one of the soft skills that we need as we work with others, partner with others, and so on. So tell us more about the importance of relation building. Why is that important?
Well, first of all, relationships building, because as we mentioned earlier too, it's not the big part of how you're going to succeed is based on building rapport and relationships and connections with each other. And the bottom line is, if people deal with people, there's an old saying, everything being equal, people deal with people they like and they trust, but everything being unequal, they still deal with people they like and they trust. For example, have you ever went to buy a car, and everything, that they had the right price, the right product, everything on the car was great, but you just didn't like the salesperson. And so, and then you maybe went and spent more because you just didn't like the person. And I don't know if you've ever run into somebody you didn't like, but we all do that before.
Exactly.
So that's it. But to build those relationships, there's really 3 keys that people need to work on. And the first key is, these are what people are thinking. So when I meet with you, the first thing I'm thinking is, can I trust you? And that's a big one. So when you walk in the door, how do you establish trust right away? And there's various ways to do that. There's smiling, it's shaking their hands, it's looking them in the eye. These are key aspects of it. On the longer terms, it's doing what you say you're going to do it when you say you're going to do it, follow through. But trust is the first thing. So when you and I meet, people make up their minds too about you in milliseconds. So people are wired to be biased, they're wired to make snap judgments, and we do that really quickly. So, how we dress and how we act and how we treat people are going to judge us by that aspect of it. So the first thing people are looking for is, can I trust you? The second thing in the corporate world is, do you do a good job? And, that's just the bottom line. If you do something, do you do it? Do you do it well? And that's another thing. And the third thing is, do you care about me? Because if you don't care about me, I don't care about you. And, it's just talking about care, talking about care these days too. That could be something as simple as you and I are talking here, and then all of a sudden, you ever been to somebody and their phone goes off? And they don't even say anything to you, and they just pick it up. It's like you're not even there. And it's like, okay, I mean, at least say, I got to pick up my phone. Or don't even pick it up at that point, because, or have you ever been out to dinner and there's a family sitting there at dinner? I saw this just last night, and they're all sitting there, and nobody's talking to each other. They're just on their phones, and they're all family of 5, and nobody. And I said, "This is why even go out to dinner? What's the point?" So, you look at that. But those are the three things. Can I trust you? Are you committed to excellence? Do you do a good job? And the third thing is, do you care about me? And that's the things you need to work on, because that's how people are judging you all the time.
Are they in order of priority, or
not necessarily? Although I a lot of times trust is important, and caring is important. And what I recommend too is that, if you have a company organization, I would suggest having 15-minute meetings with your staff, and in those 15 minutes, ask them, how do we show trust? Tell them specifically. Don't let them get away with saying be reliable, because reliable means what? Reliable, does that mean we answer the phone within 3 minutes, 5 hours? But be very specific with that. But that's when I leave an organization working with them, I have them do that. I have them go ahead and next week have a 15-minute meeting and time it. Don't go over 15 minutes, because then people will give you their answers real quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. The importance of trust, especially, I have seen people blowing it up because they couldn't be able to develop that trust with their people, with their partners, and so on and so forth. I read the book of Malcolm Gladwell, Blink.
Right,
he
Blink.
talked about how people form opinion within a fraction of seconds.
Right, like that.
Right, like that. And after that, whatever you're saying, maybe they are not following. Even if they like you in terms of what you do, the way you present yourself, if they don't have that trust, then they may not even invite you the next time. They may not want to communicate with you and continue to be friend and partner with you. So trust is that much very critical in building relationships.
And it depends how you look at it too. I mean, for example, it can be simple as how you dress when you meet somebody. I do a lot. I was just out in California last week. I work with Lexus and Toyota with their corporate people, and if I came in a tie, nobody would trust me, because there's someone. He said, "Don't wear a tie. Don't wear a tie." So, but then if I work with like the FBI, I did some work for them. You better be in a tie and a suit and look nice and have that, or else they wouldn't trust you. So, definitely. It's all depends on where you're coming from. Or, one time I was working with the power company plant, and I was doing workshops between midnight and 4 in the morning, and these are the people working the power plant. And I said, what do I wear to get the rapport, the connection? He said, if you come in and think any more than jeans and a t-shirt, they think you're overdressed. So it's like you really got to weigh that, because like you said, people make up their instant judgments, and it's going to be on your dress and how you come across and whether you shake hands. All these other things have a big effect on that.
When I provide trainings, for example, some of my audience, they are managers. Mm-hmm. So the way I interact with them is very different than when I provide training, for example, IT trainings to young people like teenagers and young people in their 20s.
Right.
So we need to sense and know our audience and deal with them accordingly. So some environments, the corporate culture may require you to be formal, and in other environments it may require you to be informal, casual. So knowing that is key as you relate with people and build relationship with them.
Exactly. Yeah, all that fits in, and then when you talk about building relationships too, there's, as we said, your appearance, your how you come across, your body language makes a big difference too. And by the way, this varies by the world too. I know we're talking to the whole world here, so but from an American culture standpoint, there's a little acronym I always like to give people. It's called soften your image, to make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy. So when you come in in a room or you meet somebody, the first thing is to smile. And the only thing I say sometimes, if you don't normally smile, don't start doing it all of a sudden, because if somebody knows you real well,
could be able to see it. It may look like fake.
It looks like fake, and it's got to be genuine. So the first thing is smile. The second thing is to be open, and that's with your body language. And I don't know if people do this, but in American culture, this could be closed. It could mean I don't trust you. Ever get in a disagreement with? Let's say you and I get in a disagreement, and we do this, and then it's like it's me against you, and. So I always keep myself open, because I know people are perceiving no matter what. The F is forward lean or focus, leaning towards the person you're talking to and focusing on them. You ever talk to somebody, for example, and they're looking all around but at you?
Yeah, you sense that they're not interested, or they are not respecting what you say, and they're not there. They're not engaged with you.
You're not engaged with you, and it takes them away, and you lose on that one.
Yeah, by the way, I was, as a trainer, I should work hard on myself to be self-aware, because there are things that I'm blindsided, and it's not good because I stand in front of people. I should not send a wrong message and so on. So I invest a lot of time to figure out about some of the things that I may say or do or act that may be misinterpreted by my audience.
Right.
So sometimes I ask people feedback. How's my smile? Or how's about my my haircut, or the way I dress myself, just to get the sense of whether I am actually aware of how people are interpreting.
And it's interesting too when you say about blindsiding. I mean, because even though you and I have done this for a long, long time, I've written books on it, I've done all these things on these things. The other day I was talking to an 8-year-old at somebody's house, and I was just picking up some food, and he just looked me in the eye and said, "Mr. Sanow, you should look at me when you talk to me." And it's like, excuse me, but
correcting you.
Yeah, it's like I'm paid a lot of money to tell people this stuff, and I'm not doing it. You know how it's like I always tell my audience, it's like, because you probably have this. Somebody says, "Well, I've been to one of these before." I said, "It's nice you've been there. I've done 2,500 of these, and I still mess up."
Exactly.
So it's like you got to keep reminding yourself of this stuff. That's the problem, and I give you a lot of credit for looking at yourself, because sometimes I've seen people who in positions like ours, and they think they know it all and they're the greatest, and that's the worst mistake you can make, is to become complacent in that area.
I think I always want to believe that I am on the learning curve.
Right.
I always want to get feedback. Even sometimes what I do is I encourage people by giving them some of my weaknesses, so that they feel like, okay, if I give him feedback, serious feedback, then he won't be offended. Because some people don't give you feedback thinking that you may be offended, because they like you, they respect you. If they give you some feedback, they may think that you may be offended, and that affects the relationship. That's why I become proactive, and I give them, for example, I know that I stumble in my pronunciations once in a while. So would you please help me improve my pronunciation? Now they know that I acknowledge that I'm on the learning curve when it comes to how to pronounce words the American way, because English is my second language. I've been studying how to pronounce right. So if I break the news telling them that, hey, I have this weakness, I need to improve it, would you please help me? Now they become more bold to give me some feedback, because I gave them the space. I allowed them, I permitted them. So it's also very important to give people something, so that you may get something out of them.
Well, and it's also, when you say get something out of them, when we talked about the 3 keys to building relationships, one is trust, and the more you or I divulge about ourselves, the more people trust you, and the more people will open up to you, versus just coming in and saying, "I'm the greatest and I don't need anything. I'm perfect," and it's like so. And it's like, okay, and then you lost everybody right there.
Exactly.
So, good point.
Then the next question is, how can we avoid, because there are words, and also there are some things that we are doing that may create distress and so on in our relationships. So how can we avoid these words and these actions and so on and so forth?
Well, I think you got to look, and this varies again by culture and country, but some things that get us into trouble and destroy relationships and stuff. First thing I'd say is watch out when you're talking to somebody about sex, politics, and religion, because half the people are going to hate you in the room. As you talk about a political person, half the people are going to not like them. So then, and sometimes people get all bent out of shape on this type of stuff too. So sex, politics, and religion, I would stay away. And it's interesting too, when I talk about sex, there was a guy, a vice president of a major company, and he went to all the top schools and all this, and he makes some joke about women at a big meeting, and half the people hated him there, and he almost got fired. It's like you just got to have this sense, like, okay, that's not gonna go over. And I'm always surprised how sometimes smart people will do this. So sex, politics, and religion are though. Also, when you're talking to people, watch out for words that will get them defensive. For example, using the word "you did this" or "you did that" immediately gets me defensive. Or you use the words "always" or "never." And, always or never is another defensive tone there, too. Some other words that I would watch out for, the word "no problem." For example, when you use the word "no problem," people hear the word "problem." So, for example, at Hyatt hotels or Disneyland and some of those places, if you go to a Hyatt hotel and you talk to the desk receptionist and you say thank you to the desk receptionist, they're trained not to use the word "no problem," so they'll say "it's a pleasure," or thank you and stuff like that. I think they get fined if they use the word no problem.
I use no problem, so starting from today, I'll take that out.
Take that out of your vocabulary. The other word I would say is, this was in the USA Today a while ago, on the front page of the newspaper. They said the number one word that Americans hated the most, 47% of Americans said the number one word they hated the most was whatever. So when you say whatever to somebody, it's dismissing them. You're dismissed. Or another word that they didn't like, it is what it is. So when you say it is what it is, it means we can't do anything about it. So it's just, you might as well give up, go home and give up. Other words I would watch out for acronyms, like, for example, we're talking to somebody, for example, or jargon. Let's say
in the IT field or in science and so on.
It could be in any of these things. So for example, if I say to you today, let me tell you about the XL4793, 10 minutes later, what are you still thinking about? What's the XL97?
Yeah.
And then we get into trouble on that stuff too. Now, there's a ton of words you can watch out for, but the other thing I would say is a lot of times these cause misunderstandings with people. And when I say misunderstandings, there's one word can make a big difference in how people perceive you or whatever. And so when I say misunderstandings, one of the things I recommend is we paraphrase what you've said. So when you say, Arnold, when we finish a conversation, I just want to make sure this is what I understood you, and say it over, because a lot of times, how many times have we done a job and we did a job and then 3 weeks later somebody says that's not what I wanted at all because we didn't ask that question in the mind. So that's how we look at it.
By the way, how can we make people sing our praises? Okay,
to sing our praises, to get people to love us, to like us, to do everything in that, there's 6 things I like to think about. And the first thing is attitude. And I don't mean to be touchy-feely on this, but people like people in good spirits when you really boil it down to it. And there's an exercise I did a long time ago. I had a contract with National and Dulles Airport here in Washington, D.C. area. It was about 10 years ago. And we had about a 37% less complaints from the people who came to the customers, because we did one thing. We had everybody from bus drivers all the way up to the management had a little black book, and we called it the flip side exercise. So when something went wrong, somebody yelled at you, what's the flip side? They had to write it down. And the process of writing it down made it so that you after a while, you didn't take these things so personally. So for example, if you put a dent in your new car, the flip side of that is, at least I got a car. Or you hate your job. Well, the flip side is you got a job. You should be thankful. So, all these things play into effect right there. And the other thing I tell on that flip side exercise too is when you talk about attitude, something that really helped me, and I'd help the audience here too, is when something goes wrong and you feel everything's going wrong in your life, or you're having a down day, always ask yourself this question: what am I grateful for at this moment? What am I grateful for at this moment? Because every time I feel like sorry for myself or something's going down, well, I can sit here and talk to you. I got legs, I can have arms, I can see you, and so I didn't get a great dinner last night. Who cares? It's like there's people starving, right? So
Exactly.
You should just be, what am I grateful for at this moment? So ask yourself that question. To keep your attitude in good shape. So the first thing is attitude. Second thing to get people singing your praises is to be reliable, and do what you say you're going to do it when you say you're going to do it good on time, all those aspects of it. Third thing is be responsive. Are you accessible, willing to help people when they can do it? The fourth thing is be credible, and that gets back into trust. Do people trust you? And we can talk more about that later. The fifth thing is appearance. The old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. What does everybody do? They judge a book by its cover. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a show called Britain's Got Talent, and there was a woman named Susan Boyle. Okay. And she came out, and it was a talent show, and she was supposed to sing, and she was big, she didn't look like a singer, and everybody's going, oh, who does she think she is? And then she does a great job and wins the whole contest. Wow. So you got to watch out how you make those snap judgments. And I would say in that place and appearance, watch out for stereotypes too, because a lot of times we don't even know we're stereotyping people. And I use an exercise sometimes in my sessions on, have people, what are some of the characteristics and stereotypes or behaviors of men? What are some of women? And people give up all these things. And it's interesting because it's not necessarily true at all. But people feel that way, and so they don't trust them in a way. So, for example, I had a salesperson one time who went in to sell something, and a woman was in charge, and she had two men who sat next to her, a man here and a man here. And the salesperson comes in, he's smooth, he's got the right price, the right product, and he goes in to talk. And here's the woman in charge, and here's the two men sitting next to her. Who did he look at the whole time? He looked only at the men. He never looked at the woman in charge. And he had the right price, right product, everything else. And he walked out, and he thought, probably, I got this. And later they told me the woman banged the table and said, I don't want anybody ever working with him or that company ever again. So some stereotype in his head from long ago said women don't count, or who knows what.
Exactly.
And you got to watch that. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think I heard some experts talking about sometimes some CEOs, for example, when they want to hire someone for critical positions, they watch how the candidates interact with their secretaries, for example.
Yes, exactly.
They go out from their office, sit as if they are guests, and watch that person, how he comes in, communicate with his secretary, and if that person senses that he disrespected his secretary, it's unlikely that that boss going to hire him, because it doesn't matter whether he respects him, because now he saw her how he treated his secretary, so he judges his character based on his interaction with her than interaction with him.
And I think that's important when you say character, because character is, my definition of that is being nice to somebody who can't do you any good. Okay, so you and I can probably do each other good, so we're nice to each other. But let's say just being nice to the person who has no can affect or give you anything, and that's what I look at character. And when you say that about looking at the secretary, there's a few companies I work with that actually will do this. They'll actually take somebody. Let's say I'm thinking of hiring you. They'll take you to lunch, and what the first thing they'll keep their eyes on is how you treat the waiters and the waitresses. And so because let's say you're thinking of hiring me, I'll be real nice to you, right?
Yeah.
But then I'll, do this to the waiter, I'll do that. Then I won't say thank you when they come and all this stuff. And I've learned that lesson a long time ago. So now if somebody would ever interview me, I would actually help the waiter take the trays. I'd clean the dishes. Just there's a little trick there.
Exactly. Because we need to study, because this is human behavior.
Right,
so we need to understand. One of the things that I always think is, for example, myself or anybody, we don't do something that really damages our reputation or who we are. Whatever we do, maybe we don't have any awareness, and also we don't know how people interpret that. So we need to go out and learn how people interpret our actions, our behaviors, and so on. So my question is, what are some of the ways that we may create kind of misunderstanding that may derail our relationships? Some
of the ways we have misunderstandings?
Yes, create misunderstandings that may derail our relationships.
Yeah, and misunderstandings, I mean, for example, just looking at men and women too, on your stereotypes could be a misunderstanding. But again, it's the words you use and stuff like that. So one word can make a big difference. Or body language. When we talk about misunderstandings that get into problems, let's say I'm at a party somewhere and I'm standing in a corner. And you might think, well, that guy's stuck up, or he thinks he's so great, but it could be that I'm very shy too. So you could do that.
That may be also true with cultures. Some cultures people may be implicit in their communication, reserved. They may be inward looking than outward looking. So you're right. We should not really have those prejudices before we understand from which space that person comes.
Yeah,
because it could be, as you said, somebody may be introvert.
Yeah, somebody could be an introvert and an extrovert, and people don't get that sometimes either. It's like, I remember my son when he was young, he went to, he was going to his friend's house, and his friend was a really deep introvert. And when we talk about introvert and extrovert, the big definition of that is extroverts get their energy from people, introverts don't, but introverts can still be very dynamic. I heard some statistic like 60% of all the motivational speakers are introverts, believe it or not. But when they're on stage, they're like so unbelievable.
By the way, I'm introverted, forced introverted. Because
that's why you're a motivational speaker.
Yes, I draw energy when I read books, when I'm alone, when I walk, when I reflect. So, but as a professional, I'm always out there helping people, empowering people, serving people. During that time, I change the mode. Like I become energetic, I serve, but the moment I get the chance to get away, I go alone, think, reflect, read, and then get some energy. So I cannot continuously, for example, provide trainings, mentorings, and so on, and refrain from having space, for example, for myself to think.
And I think what people need to understand is they need to understand those things. Like, it's not personal. Like if I said, hey, do you want to go out to dinner after this? And you say, not really. And see, the problem is I may take it as personal, which I think some of the times when we look at other people we know, we really got to understand. There's a great book called Quiet. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's about the power of introversion, and it talks about introverts quite a bit, and it'll demystify some of the things you understand about that, because I think a lot of people think introverts are quiet and shy, and they're not. I mean, they're just, after a while, it's time to, I did my speech, I talked to everybody, I had a good time, and you did, right? You had a good time doing that. I mean, you're having a good time now, it looks like. Yeah. But then there's a point like, I just want to take a walk, or I'm happy just to go into a Starbucks and just read my book or something, and it's like, and then people just... And if they're a super extrovert, they're going to think what? They're going to think there's something wrong with this person.
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the trainings that I specialize, especially in diversity and inclusion, because I lived in two cultures. Yeah, two opposite cultures. I lived in Ethiopia, which is a communal culture where most of us tend to be reserved, inward-looking. Yeah. And I lived in the United States, which is a celebrity culture, individual-based, which means more people tend to be outward-looking, explicit in their communication, verbal in their communication, unlike from communal culture where most of the time people try to communicate non-verbally. Right. The challenge that I share with my audience, most of them are mid-level managers, is that you may have people from diverse cultures. Right. Understand first your culture, why you do what you do, why. I mean, understanding the why you communicate this way. And understand also why other people from diverse culture communicate in certain ways, rather than judging them or filtering them based on your own cultural expectations. Why don't you go the extra mile? Try to understand, for example, why they treat time the way they treat it, why they treat space, territory, the way they treat it, or why they communicate, it could be high context culture, in our case, communal culture, or in the case of, for example, in the United States, Europe, and Australia, and so on, this is low context, which means things are detailed, explicit, and so on. Understanding that helps them to be more effective in terms of leading people from diverse culture. Right. And as you know, this is a 21st century. Right. It's likely that you're going to work with people from diverse culture, but some managers may think that as far as they know their culture very well, because you can have IQ when it comes to your intellectuality, you could have social intelligence, the norms, the taboos, the expectations in your own culture. But you need to have cultural intelligence, which means you should also know the expectations, the taboos, and the norms of other cultures. That makes you culturally intelligent, and people look for this kind of leaders in the 21st century, because even if you don't work with diverse people in person, you're going to work with them virtually around the world. So that's very important, as you say, to
and it's interesting because every time, because I've gone overseas a lot and worked with companies over there and people over there. I'm actually having a meeting with somebody from Qatar in a little bit after this to talk about there, and all those cultures are totally different. And I always there's books you can get that basically go into, like, I do a crash course on, because I could easily offend somebody, and it goes to, I think, what you're saying too. There's an old saying, understand others first before having them understand you. And if you treat everybody the same way based on your communication style and your styles and how you were raised and all this other stuff, you're going to miss the boat about 75% of the time. So you really need to actually get to know do your research and do your homework before you go in, because not everybody thinks like you. And then, as you said too, with cultures, a lot of the cultures are just people just like you, but I mean they look like you even, but it's a different culture. They were raised differently. They came from a different place. Their families were different. They have different religions, different backgrounds, and they start, and if you don't take all that into account, then that's when you get into trouble.
You talk about how to say no in a nice way.
Yeah.
Would you please talk about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do a lot on how to converse with people in a nice way. Because, I could say, let's say you're interrupting me at work, and I could say something. I could say, I'm busy right now. Can you just leave? And that'll work. You'll leave, right?
Yeah.
But what's happening?
Resent you.
You'll resent me. You'll probably never come up and interrupt me ever again.
Exactly.
So even if there's something important, you won't.
And that affects our relationship.
Chip away at that connection, that relation.
Exactly.
So let's say you're interrupting me at work, and I'll say something, and I call it the USA method. USA. So the USA method is this. So let's say you're interrupting, so I'll say, I understand, that's the you, that this is important to you. And by saying that, I'm making you feel important. I'm hearing you. I'm empathizing with you. So I understand this is important to you. However, that's what I'd say next, the situation, which is the S, the situation is I've got this report that's due out at 4:15 today. And what I'm doing here is I'm giving a reason. People listen to people. You'll get a lot more compliance if you give reasons, especially managers who give reasons, than if you just don't give a reason. So I understand this is important to you. However, here's the situation. I've got this report that's due out at 4:15 today. And then the A is action or alternative. And what I mean by action or alternative is, why don't we meet tomorrow at 5:30? Why don't you get lost? And I wouldn't say that, but I mean something to that point.
Yeah.
So I would bring it up. But you could use that also in a meeting. Somebody's talking too long in a meeting. I understand you want to talk about this right now, but here's the situation. We've got lunch in about, 15 minutes here. Can I meet with you later in the afternoon or something?
That's
so it's
great.
It's a good way to say it. That's empathizing with, hearing them, and it's pleasant. So I always like that one, and you can use it in a lot of different situations. USA.
I'm going to use that.
Understand situation, and action or alternative. So.
By the way, it's very important, because what I found out is that myself and many of my friends, it's very hard for us to say, for example, no to people that we care about,
right.
people we
That's
respect.
true. Yeah.
So what we do is I say yes, but I don't do it. And that affects the relationship in the long term.
Yeah.
Because I should have said no, because of, as you said, I can use the USA method and explain to them you understand that they need me to do it. The situation is this. We can do it this way, and so on. By
give
giving
them an
them
alternative
action
or something.
alternative. But normally, what we do is we don't want to offend people, friends, and colleagues, partners, and clients, and we say, "Okay, I will do it." Yeah. And then we don't do it. I think that's no good and favorable for our relationships, because it creates mistrust. They don't trust you anymore.
Right.
You lose your credibility. So you have to know how to say no in a very nice way.
In a nice way. And also you want to, just from a business standpoint, or just from getting work done these days, you ever say yes and you're saying, why did I say yes? And why did I say yes? And
you do it, but complain.
We do it and we complain, and then it's bothering you. And I've just learned over the time, if I don't want to do something, I just say no. And it's like, it relieves all that burden from you, from taking all these things on. You know how somebody says, here's a project, and here's a project, and I'll say, I understand. Here's the situation. I got 5 projects to do, and anyway, go through the process.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't know how to do it in a nice way as you described it, but I got some results when I started to say no. Sometimes people may be offended, but now I know how to fix that. But some people respect that. Mm-hmm. Because myself, I respect those people who tell me right away.
Yeah.
No, rather than people who may say, okay, AZ, I will do it, and then they don't do it. You call them, they don't respond.
Right,
and then that's not good for the relationship. Rather, they should have said no, even if I may be offended. So I started to say no, got some results, but I didn't know how to really say no in the nice way. So it's good that I use now the USA model.
And it's just showing that you're listening and you care, and they're important. You want to make people feel important. So that's an important part.
So how can we become approachable, likable, and also trustworthy?
Well, the big key on that is there's a few things, and the thing that we talked about earlier was the body language too, was one way. Soften your image. The smile, the open, the forward lean, the focus, the T. I don't know if we've gone through. I think we went through 3 of those. The soften, to be more approachable. A lot of that's body language. So this S, we got through the smile, we got through the open, we got for the forward lean. The T in the soften is territory. And that means getting into somebody's space. For example, do you know anybody, and this varies by culture, but in American culture, you know anybody who's like right in your face, and you step backwards and they just keep going, and they just keep, and you don't get it all. You know,
exactly.
And it's like you're not approachable anymore. I don't want to say anything to you, so stuff. The E in the soften is eye contact, and when we talk about eye contact, that's not staring at anybody either. That's every 3 to 5 seconds you should look away a little bit because people feel uncomfortable if you stare. But stay on the person till you finish a point and then move from there.
And also focus on their eyes. Then looking at top or somewhere else, they may feel, even if you look at them, if you look down their eyes or up their eyes, it creates discomfort. So maintain the eye contact directly to their eyes.
Yeah, directly to their eyes. And it's interesting, too, because when I work with people, I do a lot of presentation skills training, too, and I have people, I said, the key on that is to keep on somebody till you make the point. But it's interesting, when I see a lot of people I'm working with, they're doing this. They're never looking at the audience. They think they have good eye contact, but they're going, let me tell you about the 4 things, but they've never connected with anybody. So you always pick somebody out there and you say, let me tell you, and if in 1,000 people, let's say I'm talking to, and I'll look at you way in the middle there. Everybody around there thinks I'm looking at them. So
it could be like a fraction of a second or maybe a couple of seconds. You connect with them. But one of the things that I would like to mention is there is cultural issue here.
There is a cultural issue, right?
In some cultures, of course, looking at someone's eyes may be disrespectful,
right.
Maybe treated as disrespectful, because in some cultures you should not look at your boss's eye, your parents' eye, or your elderly people eyes.
Yeah.
You should not contact them directly. So we understand that in some cultures maybe it's disrespectful, but in many cultures, maintaining that eye contact is very, very important.
And one thing I would add on that too, there's a book called Do's and Taboos of International Travel by a guy named Roger Axel. And every time I go overseas, I look at that. So if I go to Qatar, I'm going to look at that and make sure I don't do any of the things I'm saying now, to mess up. But the E, so let's soften, S-O-F-T. E is eye contact. I would also say energy and enthusiasm for the E. And if you ever want to persuade people are more convinced by your energy, enthusiasm, and conviction than anything else you do. So there's ways to work on that, and that could be a whole nother show. But anyway, and then the N is to nod to show you're paying attention to people. Now, when I say nod, too, this gets back to, when you talk about culture, nodding for a woman and a man is quite different. So if we're in an audience, let's say you're doing one of your training sessions, and all the women in there are nodding, that does not necessarily mean they agree with you.
Yeah.
That means they're processing the information. And a lot of guys walk out saying, hey, man, I aced this. These women loved it. And the women are all thinking, that was the biggest jerk I ever met. So, it's like it's a whole different phase there.
Exactly.
So it's nodding, but generally nodding to show you're paying attention on that, too. Also, if you're on the phone, you don't have your body language. You just have your tone. So to be more approachable on the phone, watch how you're talking to people. So, for example, I shouldn't say this about my wife, but I'll call my wife sometimes, and she's very she's busy all the time. So I'll say, Nancy, how things going? And she'll talk for like a second, and then she'll say, how's things with you? And as soon as I start talking, she'll go, which literally means, look, get off the phone. I got better things to do. So, and I watch that sometimes because I'll work with. Sometimes I'm hired to work with call centers on their customer service and stuff, and you really got to watch, understanding and being patient with people on the phone and watching how your tone is, because that's how as you want to be more approachable, likable, and trustworthy. It's not going to come across the right way.
So you mentioned great methods and models like USA, Soften, and so on. Have you written them in detail in your books?
Yes, it's in this book here. Get on, if I can. This is shameless self-promotion, but get along with anyone, anytime, anywhere is online. I mean, you can get it at bookstores, but it's also online too. And if you go to Barnes & Noble, I know it's Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com. It is cheaper, so I'm giving you a break there. And then the other one that I've written 6, but these are the 2 that are out right now. Present with Power, Punch, and Pizzazz. If you're interested in on presentation skills, whether you talk to one person or 50 or even at a staff meeting. This is important tips right there.
Yeah, I mentioned that because I asked you that because I believe that we have short period of time. They may not be able to learn everything they should learn from you. So it's good that you're referencing them to read the books
and I wrote these as reference books too, because I know I was listening to National Public Radio the other day, and they said that to have a bestseller, everybody should be able to read any page within 50 seconds or less. So because nobody wants to read anymore. So where do I go if I want to know, okay, I have a tough audience situation. Here's 11 things to do. It's written so you can just use it as a resource in that case. So
the last thing I would like us to talk about, you mentioned it already, but I would like us to emphasize is about attitude as you interact with other people.
Yeah.
How important it is.
Yeah.
To create relationships and also get along with people.
Yeah, well, attitude, and we discussed it a little earlier too, because attitude, when we talk about that, I think I mentioned that the key that really makes a difference is that flip side exercise. For example, we discussed that, which is what's the flip side to anything that happens. And I suggest to keep your attitude adjusted, you do that. Also with attitude, I'd make sure you keep, what am I grateful for at this moment, will keep your attitude in good shape. On that aspect. But it's interesting because some companies, and I don't know if they still do this, but Hyatt hotels, I think they used to, if you applied for any job at a Hyatt and you did not smile within a 5-minute interview at least 5 times, you would never get a job there. Wow. Or I know Disney World, if you're bad mood that day, they don't fire you, but they take you off the line, because what happens, your body language and tone comes out in a negative way.
And it affects the company.
And it affects the company, and its attitude is there. But the general thing about attitude is people like people in good spirits. And so, if you run into people who you ask them you say to them good morning, and they say, well, what's good about it? Then you don't hire them
attitude.
either. Yeah, you do not hire them. And it's interesting because some of the companies I've worked for, like Lexus and Toyota with their corporate managers, and when they hire them, their big thing is we hire on attitude and then build their experience. And so what they'll do is when I walk into a room of management trainees to work with them in a day, they're doing everything perfect. I'm thinking, you guys don't even need this stuff. I don't want to say that, because then they won't hire me. But the point is, they're so trained in that. They're so friendly. They're engaged. They're on the edge of their seats all the time. They look like they want to be there. And it's like when you go into a meeting or you meet people, look like you want to be there. How many people sometimes go into these? You ever see somebody walk into a meeting and because you're being judged all the time. I mean, this is the Lexus Toyota philosophy. You're always being interviewed, no matter what job you have. And you and I are always being interviewed too, because we're making impressions about each other. Hope it's good. I should have worn a yellow tie. I knew it. But a yellow tie, you would have it more impressive. But anyway, I mean, we're all being judged all the time, and I like their philosophy. That's when you walk in there, they say, you got the job, but you're always being interviewed because people are watching what you're doing. And I always tell this to students too. At least look like you want to be here to your manager, because I mean, it's like when I was in school. When I was I got through school, I would always sit in the front, and I would always be on the edge of my seat, and I'd always be smiling, looking at the teacher. And first of all, she never called on me because she thought I knew everything, and I always got good grades. So I mean, it's like, just look like you want to be there. That's part of when you talk about attitude.
Yeah. As a trainer, for me also, I always pay closer attention about my attitudes and also how I approach. For example, I don't want to show, for example, good attitude when I'm with them, but how do I show attitude starting from even the parking spot? Because from the parking spot up to starting from the parking lot, because people may be watching you before you even arrive at the training center. So we have to maintain that attitude wherever we are, because everybody is watching you. You are a speaker, you are a trainer, you are a leader. People, as you said, are interviewing you, even if it's not directly targeted to
you. When you say it starts from the beginning, I always get there early for any program I have, and I just, as soon as I'm standing by the door, and I just greet everybody who comes in the door. Hi, I'm Arnold Sanow. And it's nice, and a lot of people bring that up later, like, what did you pick up about this whole session? They said, I picked up that I should build rapport instantly with people and take the time. And there's a speaker named Neem Janes. I don't know if you've heard of her or not, but
yeah.
she said, one of the things she said that really stuck with me, because a lot of people are shy. We're not, if I go up to you in the middle of the street and say hello, you probably think I'm a serial killer or something. Yes, like, get away from me. So we're not in tune to actually, why is that guy talking to me?
Why he's nice.
Yeah, but so I tell people, if you're shy or a little nervous, but when you go to a session or something and you don't know people, just go up to them. So for example, she uses like when you were a little kid. And think about this. When I was a little kid, I would just go up to anybody and say, hey, you want to play today? You want to play? You didn't think, but when you get adults, you say, should I talk to them?
Overthink it.
Yeah, you overthink it. And when you're a kid, and so she has a little saying that says, everyone wants to play with me. Wow. And I've recommended to my clients, and a lot of people came back and said, that really made a difference to me, because now when I go in a meeting, in my mind, I think everybody wants to play with me, and it just gets me in the mood to just go, hi, I'm Arnold Sanow. And nobody's going to bite you. They're probably going to like you because they're standing there alone by themselves, and somebody's making an introduction. So that was a big thing I learned. Everyone, just think about it. It sounds corny, but everybody wants to play with me, and it works to get you if you're a little shy or a little nervous. And then after a while, you start doing it on the streets, and nobody kills you. So, so.
Arnold, really, I enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you.
I wish if we continue to discuss, but thank you very much.
Okay,
for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate for you coming.
Dear
our viewers, this is my hope that you enjoyed our discussion. You got so many things that may help you become great in terms of your relationship and working with others and getting along with other people as you work with them. Now, you may be a technical person watching this program. We gave you some tips in terms of how you should develop your soft skills. This is my hope that as we communicate in the coming weeks and months, you may keep on getting some soft skills from the discussion that I'm gonna have with my experts. For today, you got the most important ones. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to see you in the future. Thank you.